Hello, everybody, and welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Lori Hoover, intuitive guide and psychic medium. Together, let's wake the fuck up. Today's podcast is a special Sweetest Day release and all about my favorite subject, love. My guest is a mystic, teacher, former founder and CEO of a multi-million-dollar consumer products company, and author of The Synchronicity of Love, extraordinary stories of what happened when, while at rock bottom, he threw himself into unconditional love with sincerity and earnestness. These stories about his journey will inspire, uplift, heal, shock, awaken, and transform. They contain the seeds of potential to change habits, beliefs, and one's deepest assumptions about what is possible, and have the power to radically transform anyone's life. He's sharing his very personal stories, the supreme value in embracing deep and lasting transformation in love, business, money, relationships, health, and so much more, so that even the most stuck, rigid, and logical people can transform in unimaginable ways. Please welcome John David Latta to the show.
Thank you so much, Lori. I'm really happy to be here. Appreciate the invitation.
Yes, I'm happy to have you here. This is absolutely one of my favorite topics, and especially because this is rooted in self-love, which is, in my opinion, the most important love, because without it, we block so much good from our lives. We push things away, push good people away. We don't accept help. There are so many ways that we do ourselves disservice by not having a deep, abiding self-love. So I'm really excited to have this conversation with you and to hear your story. So if you want, let's just jump in. I want to know, what was it like to be a single dad with custody of your young children while you're in the process of this major spiritual transformation? And like, how did that all work for you?
Well, at the time, it was freaking scary is what it was. I kept thinking, because I about 2 years into my journey, and by 2 years, I mean, the book really chronicles the last 20 years of my life. And 20 years ago is when I went through what I call the big shift, or was the beginning of the big shift. And big shift into a kind of competitive, rational male, discovering, quite honestly, his feminine side and a whole spiritual side that I didn't even know existed. And about 2 years into it, I had a full-on Kundalini awakening, and I didn't even know what the word meant. So, but I was at that point a single dad raising two kids. They were probably ages 9 and 11, roughly. And I was, I had a struggling company that I had managed to dig myself into $650,000 in debt, $250,000 in personal credit card debt. And so, and then I have this amazing spiritual awakening going on. And I admit every day I was afraid I was going to become weird or incapacitated somehow, that I wasn't going to be able to raise my kids, that I wasn't going to be able to run my company anymore. And so I straddled two worlds where one foot felt like, wow, I'm being graced beyond belief. Another one is just petrified that I'm going to be weird somehow. And that's what it felt like every freaking day of my life. I remember sometimes like coming home from work early and trying to get in a little nap before the kids got off the school bus. And I would just barely close my eyes and have the most hyper vivid dreams. I think a lot of people that have experienced this Kundalini energy, at least a lot of the authors I ended up reading, will tell you it's sexual energy, it's primal energy, it's goddess energy, it's earth energy, it's powerful stuff. And every time I'd close my eyes, I would just be inundated with goddesses and all this, these crazy experiences. And then the doorbell would ring and my kids just got off the school bus and boom, okay, goddesses, you have to go away now. Big giant serpents, cobras, strange energy. I got to go tend to my kids. Hey, how was school today? And so that's what it was like every day. And looking back, it wasn't hard. I want to say the wiser part of myself, the energy or whatever you want to call it, knew just how far to push me, just when to pull back. It turned out I had a say in this too. There were times I said, you can't come tonight. I'm too tired. I just need to sleep. And no energy would come, no dreams, no visions. And then about the next day or two, I'd like, okay, I think I'm feeling better. Boom, here it would come again. So that's what it was like.
That sounds unbelievable. It sounds almost crazy. Like I can't even imagine. Now I haven't experienced anything like that, so my awakening was much more tame than any of that.
Well,
So,
I think sometimes, I sometimes think my book, I call it the synchronicity of love because I started to notice the more I followed the path of love, the more synchronicity started to happen. But I honestly think I could have titled the book Rigid Rational Male Transforms into Random Accidental Mystic. And I think because I pushed all things spiritual away, I think sometimes that's why my awakening was so intense and extreme, because some people, it is kind of a soft, they kind of ease into it, like an awakening's kind of soft. Mine was like, I think I had to be hit in the head 50 times.
yeah. And I think too that that's just the way that you currently are in your life because you said you were rigid, and that tends to be the people that do need to wake the fuck up, which is, that's
Yeah.
exactly, yeah, exactly why the title of my podcast is what it is, because some people just need that extra, bam, just right in your face. Here it is. Wakey,
I,
wakey.
uh, I have to, you just reminded me, I had a tiny little snippet of a dream early on where I'm asleep and some nature spirits show up in my dream with loud cymbals and they slam them together and yell at me, wake up. So, except
Oh
they didn't
my
put the F
God.
bomb in there, but that's basically what they were telling me. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Dang. I can't even imagine. And I mean, I can imagine just because you're explaining it, but it's so different than what I experienced. That
Yeah.
holy crap, you
Yeah.
know? And and for you to recognize that you did have a say in it and were able to tell them, nope, not today, not tonight, I need to sleep or whatever. I had a similar experience as a medium, having people come to me like when I was in the shower, you
Yeah.
know, that's a no. Get the hell out.
Yeah.
I would absolutely love it if you would just pick some of the different stories that you have. And because we did mention these transformations in different areas in life, love, business, money, relationships, if you can just maybe pick one that sort of highlights an individual area, I think that would be amazing and really, truly beneficial for the listeners, because I'm sure that somebody is going to find something in these stories that they can relate to that would help.
Yeah, so we talked about it a little bit off the air, and I scribbled down 4 stories I'd like to share, and each one at its core, I think, still comes to love, and related to love is healing too. So they're all healing dreams of one kind or another, even though they each affected a different part of my life. The first one is early on in my journey. I joined a dream forum. I'd gone to a spiritual retreat, loved the teacher, and he created a dream forum online about a year later, joined. He gave me an exercise to start remembering my dreams because I didn't think I dreamed, but it turned out I dreamed like a fire hose. Like if anything, I was come the same thing. I had to say, no dreams tonight. I need to sleep. And so I started sharing the dreams online, but I quickly figured out that I did not understand the language of dreams. So it was so hard for me to make sense of them. So it took me a while to kind of make sense. Well, anyway, I had experienced chronic neck pain for 6 years up to this point, and I attributed it to being rear-ended in a car crash. And a guy just plowed into me from behind, and I just thought it was chronic, whiplash type pain. And but man, it got worse and worse and worse. I went to, chiropractor, massage, acupuncture, anything I could think of. I got books on neck pain and followed the exercises faithfully. Nothing seemed to work. And So one day I come home from work early again and I'm in tears because I was athletic and active and I just couldn't believe I was going to have to live this way. I could hardly get through half my day before I would just have to lay down in tears. And I lay down in tears and you're going to love this. I said, why the fuck does my neck hurt so bad? And boom, I've got this dream. And then the dream, I just see a monk with shaved head and a red robe pacing back and forth at the end of my driveway. Just that was the dream. And I'm like, somehow I knew that dream was trying to tell me why my neck was hurting, but I didn't get what does a monk outside my house have to do with my neck pain? I got on the dream forum, explained the whole situation, and the people on there got on. And one guy in particular, who was leading the dream forum, said, that dream has everything to do with your neck pain. And I'm like, what? I don't get it. And so he said, why does a monk shave his head? Why do monks wear red robes? Why do you think he's pacing outside your house instead of inside your house? And keep in mind, Lori, this is really early in my journey. I'd been anti-spiritual for so long. He goes, I want you to open to the idea, John, that you've got a very spiritual side, a monk, a selfless monk, in service to something greater. And just open to that possibility. Okay, I'll try. So another month or two goes by and I have another dream. In this case, the guy who's leading the dream forum, his name is Brew Joy, is coming towards me with his hands, like a Reiki master, and he's going to heal my neck. And I'm like, oh my God, thank God, finally. And as he reaches for my neck with his hand, an angry old man who lives in my neck says, get the fuck away. End of dream. And so now I'm starting to put two and two together. And again, the teacher said, everybody carries stress in a certain part of your body. You just carry all your resistance in your neck. Well, Lori, I was dealing with abject fear of death. I don't even know where that came from. Being a single dad, hanging by a thread financially, going through the spiritual transformation. And it's like I had a steel rod jammed to my neck. And I think I was carrying all my resistance there. So again, he just said, try to release the resistance in your neck. Try to release everything that you're resistant to. And Lori, probably 2 more years goes by and I have this hyper vivid dream where I'm holding a giant golden thumbtack and I'm sitting in my office at home and I go to stick it in the bulletin board behind me. And instead, it feels weird. I turn around and I plunge the tack into the heart of this beautiful, Tibetan monk who's in my house and looking at me with such love. And I realized my neck didn't hurt anymore. It just didn't hurt anymore. And so I know it was so, I want to encourage all listeners that dreams have the ability to give you information, even though it might seem cryptic. There's something there for you. And, psychologists sometimes say it's making the unconscious conscious. And I wasn't conscious of how much resistance I carried in my neck. And when I started learning to open to the spiritual side of me, not to resist so many different things, no more neck pain. And so I have a number of stories in my book like that, where dreams were quite profound and led me in a direction that led, in some cases, to actual physical healing.
That is crazy. Yeah. That is crazy. But I agree with you so much about the dreams can hold these nuggets of information that will provide healing or remove that resistance, remove the blockages in our way from manifesting what we want or just moving forward in life. Yeah. I encourage everybody to keep a pen and paper next to their bed, because even if you wake up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom and you have the memory of something you were dreaming, jot down a couple keywords or whatever. Just keep that, even if you keep the paper on the sink in the bathroom, just have it available so that you can jot that stuff down, because I know a lot of people, they remember it when they first wake up, but within moments, it's gone. So
yeah, I'm the same way. I do exactly what you said. Sometimes I'm too tired to write the whole dream down, or I don't want to wake my wife up, so I just scribble a few words. Okay, if I just write a few words, I can remember it. Usually I can. When I wake up, I can remember the dream. But yeah, if you don't catch it quick, poof, it just slips through your fingers like water.
Yeah. Wow.
So another story I want to share you, and this is more, I would call a relationship healing story. Well, this is going to sound really bizarre. So I was married before, and my wife at the time, we decided to go on a tour of sacred sites in England. And the tour leader had booked us private sunrise time at Stonehenge. And so I'd never been to Europe, never been to England before. And we got to see all these cool sacred sites, and I had a lot of cool experiences. But when I got there on the first day, I met all the people we were going to be touring with, and they were from all over the world, and they were so cool. And I loved everybody there except our tour leader. I hated her. And so she was 6 foot tall, big head, big shaggy hair, Italian, but seemed like with none of the passion, none of the happy passion. She was just angry, loved her conspiracy theories. She seemed unbelievably blustery, self-centered. It was just not what I pictured of a leader of sacred sites, and I just couldn't stand her. And so, mind you, I'm dealing with an 8-hour time difference, flying in from Seattle, and England is going through a once every 100-year heat wave. It literally was 100 degrees every day for the first 7 days. And there's even less air conditioning in England than there is in Seattle. Basically, nothing. The only cool place was the grocery store. We'd all hang out by the freezer in the grocery store. And so I went to bed that first night, determined not to let her ruin my trip. And I had been learning about projection, and I'd learning about heart centering and learning about taking back projections. And I had learned this healing process, although I didn't really understand it completely, called Ho'oponopono. And so I went to bed just very sincerely, like, I do not want to hate this woman for my whole trip. So the little ritual I created in the sleep, because mind you, it's 100 degrees in our hotel room too, because we're on the 3rd floor with a window the size of a postage stamp and no air conditioning. 8-hour time difference. So I'm wide awake. And so I'm like, I lay there and I put my hands on my heart center and I try and imagine her as me. And so one of the ways to look at this kind of process is the very thing that you see in another person you can't stand is an aspect of yourself. So I try to find a part of me that's blustery, mouthy, self-centered, loves a good conspiracy theory. And I didn't have to rig too far to find some of those in me. And so I kind of bring her up in my mind's eye and my heart center. And I kept looking at her, my mind's eye, just saying, I'm sorry, I love you, please come home. As if I wasn't casting her out, I was bringing those qualities back. And they did it like a mantra for like a whole hour. And finally drifted off into a little sleep. Well, the next day, and by the way, she was incredibly psychic, intuitive, and clairvoyant. So I was just sure she knew I couldn't stand her, which made it even worse. I felt like I was walking around in my underwear all the time. It's like, I don't want her to know I can't stand her. But the next morning, it's a complete transformation. We throw our arms around each other like long lost pals. Now I think she's funny. She lashes out at George Bush as one of the evil reptilian, patriarchal men that's destroying the world. And it doesn't bother me. I just like her. I think she's funny. We go to dinner and we sit side by side. And a couple days into it, she pulls me aside because she did know I didn't like her. She goes, John, all the men that have come in my trips in the past have been either gay or conspiracy theorists, and you're not either one, and this is kind of weird for me. And so anyway, we ended up being pals. And like the last day at Stonehenge, it kind of occurred to me how difficult it might have been for her to kind of, these crazy logistics and pulling people in from all over the world and different time zones. It's 100 degrees every day. And so I pulled her aside and said, hey, thank you for putting this whole trip together. Must have taken a lot of courage. And she starts crying and saying, oh my God, thank you. You have no idea how much that means to me. And I remembered a quote in the Bible. It just popped into my mind at the end of the trip. Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. And I think I really grokked what he was trying to say about that. Like, I loved her as myself, and it completely changed our relationship. And Lori, I don't remember to do this all the time. Donald Trump still triggers the hell out of me sometimes, but I know it's a tool in my toolkit that I can lean on, and it has the ability to change the dynamic between myself and other people that trigger me.
Absolutely. I've never heard Ho'oponopono used in that way. It's normally I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. But to say it like you did, I'm sorry, I love you, please come home.
Yeah, I just made it up. So I don't know. It kind of Yeah, it was sort of like she was a long lost soul part, you know?
But that makes so much sense to me because I mean the premise behind Ho'oponopono is that we are all one, that we're all
Yeah,
connected, and
yeah,
that whatever that behavior is that you're witnessing in this other person or whatever that you're not quite loving, let's face that, that there is a part of you that's maybe participating in that somehow, you know? And I love the way that you did that. It
yeah.
just that resonates really strongly with me. Amazing. What an amazing thing. And I've had my own experiences with that, a similar thing, focusing on the positive in a person to shift your perception of them. And
Mhm.
the transformation has been phenomenal. Almost not quite like yours, where it was literally overnight, but
I forget, there's that, I think his name is Nisargadatta Maharaj, and he wrote a book called I Am That. And there's a quote from him I love. He goes, "Wisdom tells me I'm nothing, but love tells me I'm everything. Between the two, my life flows." And so that kind of has been my path, walking the path of love. And the deepest level, love is everything. It's the whole show, you know? And so I forget, I slip back sometimes, but I also know how to get back into it again, too, into that flow where, yeah, it's love is everything. And it's not choosy in its love. It loves the white sheep and the black sheep. It loves the whole show. And yeah, I forget, but then I remember.
and I think that that's really common and true for so many of us that get this whole thing or are in the process of understanding how it works. For me, I just say that it doesn't matter what the question is, the answer is always love.
Yeah,
So, whatever that looks like, go with that.
yeah, I agree. After you're done stamping your feet, return to love.
Because there's always, I think, going to be that there are going to be things that continue to trigger us, like Trump, and you know, it's the human experience. That's
Yeah,
what it is. I don't think we ever truly lose that. Maybe if you're a Buddha or a monk or somebody that is sitting in that space all day, you might be a little bit more lucky in that than the rest of us. But
yeah, yeah. My daughter went to Maharishi University, and where they learn transcendental meditation, and they meditate twice a day in big golden domes, and it's actually a really cool school. And she told me Maharishi talked about how we all carry like wounds and trauma, but as we wake the fuck up, the trauma doesn't have to be so traumatizing or doesn't have to last as long. And he described it like in the early days, taking like a knife or a nail and gouging a piece of wood, and the wood being us, that's the trauma. We've been gouged. But later, it's more like taking that knife or that nail and dragging it through the sand. You know what I mean? And the wind comes and eventually restores the sand. And then later, it's like dragging the knife or the nail through the water. It still makes a ripple. It still hurts, but the water quickly, and pretty soon he goes, it's like dragging it through the air. And so that's been my experience too. It's like, it's not like as you wake up that you don't continue to experience pain or things that feel, traumatizing, but they don't last as long. So I don't think I get stuck there as much. I think that's the best way to put it. And so that's one nice thing about waking up is I think you can get yourself in a hole, but you can also dig yourself back out pretty quickly.
I agree with that. Something that maybe a year ago would have knocked me on my ass for a week, I'm good in an hour,
Yeah,
you
I
know?
love it.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's wonderful to know that we have the ability to shape that and to reshape our beliefs and just rethink how we are showing up in a way that we can process in the moment, because that's something we were never taught, John, right? we
Yeah,
we never really learned how to process emotion.
I agree totally. Yeah.
So it's not only an undoing, but it's a whole new thing having to learn all of these things that we were never taught. So we have to peel back the layers of the onion, heal, peel some more, heal, peel some more, heal, you know.
Does it
Listen,
ever end, Lori? I
I don't think so, John. I
think
really
you're right.
don't. But I think
Well,
as we keep going, that the healing process and requirement also gets less and less, as does the time it takes you to write yourself again.
right, right. Well, I have a story I want to share with you that I didn't write down, but you just talked about processing emotions. I thought that'd be good because that has been a big part of my journey is maybe I'm not very skilled at feelings, just to be really honest, and processing emotion. And so in the early days, so I was dating a gal, and on our first, because we were both athletic at the time, our first date, we went for a run. But I'd had this lingering chest cold for like 6 weeks. I couldn't shake. And I was like, yeah, you go on. I just can't keep up. And she goes, well, you should go see my nutritionist. And I thought, well, I think I'm healthy. I think I exercise and eat well, but new girlfriend. Okay, I'll go see your nutritionist. So I go, and I'm there for about 20 minutes. So you know how you're sometimes with somebody and there's kind of like an awkward silence between you, and it feels like there's something that needs to be said, but you're not sure what. Well, after 20 minutes, she suddenly looks me right in the eyes. She has glasses like you do, but kind of pulls them down on the end of her nose, looks over the top of them, and says, you have grief trapped in your chest, and it goes all the way back to earliest childhood with your mother. And I was like, wow, that was the last thing I expected a nutritionist to tell me. Well, and she told me later, she's what I think today you would call a medical intuitive, but she kind of hides behind nutritionist and lets her intuition tell her how much she can share with her clients. She goes, some people, my intuition says, nope, just give them the diet, don't say anything. But she checked in, thought, I think he's going to be able to hear what I want to tell him. I'm sure as an intuitive and psychic medium, you kind of know, sometimes you say everything and sometimes you kind of hold back a little bit. And so I was 4 months old and separated from my mother for almost a year because she was in a near fatal car crash and on the edge of dying for a long time, in the hospital for 6 months. And I went to live with relatives. We were in California at the time, went to live with relatives in Seattle. And by the time we were reunited, my mother says, I didn't even recognize her. And that was her experience. And so, and I kind of fought it like, how can I be sad over something that happened when I was a baby? I don't even remember it. And it's like, nah, you'd be amazed. And so the nutritionist handed me a homeopathic remedy called lung and said, what can you do to cry? Well, Lori, crying's never been an easy thing for me, especially in front of other people. And I said, well, sometimes I tear up in sappy movies. She goes, well, go watch the sappy movies. And so I went home and turned on the movies and I tried to let myself cry. And I just, at best I could get some tears in my eyes. But then the log jam just broke. And I remember just bawling. But I don't even know what I'm crying over. And I didn't even know I had all this grief pent up in my chest. And I remember being on my hands and knees and just crying and crying and crying. And in fact, when I was all done, it kind of felt so good. I was like, wow, no wonder people do this. This actually feels really good. And so that went on for probably 2 years of teaching myself to cry, teaching myself to release and process emotion. And I found out later in Chinese medicine that unprocessed grief can show up as congestion in the chest colds. Well, I used to call it bronchitis. Every time I got a cold, it would turn into bronchitis. It would stay in my lungs 3 times a year like clockwork for weeks at a time. It all went away. No more bronchitis. So a decade of being essentially bronchitis free after that. And I had a lot of interesting supportive dreams too that were trying to tell me that feeling my feelings and processing them was going to be very supportive of my journey. And, really funny, hysterical dreams. I had one where I used to love to fish, and I was walking, down, it was like a November day in the stream, this large kind of swollen steelhead fishing river, big river. And I had walked downstream and fished. When I came back, this short, stout, impish old man, kind of looked like an oversized, I don't know, elf or something, had planted 3 weeping willows in the middle of the tree. And he winks at me, he goes, these are going to really improve the fishing. And because my experience through dreams is, in a way, through dreams, I'm kind of like a fisherman that hooks things in the unconscious. And he really wanted me to know that I was, and I had other dreams that talked about I'll have greater sense of subtlety and sensitivity because I'm feeling my feelings now. And it's like, you're going to be an even better fisherman now that you're feeling your feelings. So again, I'm going to come back to all those rigid, rational people out there, especially the men, and say, there's more to life than you think, and open up to some of these things.
I love the subtlety in the dream, even. I've never had dreams like that. So I kind of envy that, because it's a really wonderful way for your subconscious to communicate with you in a way that you can accept, right? And the fact that you had the foresight to join a group that would help you to interpret those dreams is really something.
Thank you. I
Wow.
think one thing I learned about dreams too is if there's anything you try to hide about yourself and you do dream work, be prepared, especially on a forum. Dreams speak with unvarnished honesty.
Yeah.
They're going to reveal everything about yourself, both the positive and the negative. Although I hate those terms, but I just say all the things you probably tried to hide, your goodness and your badness. Well, again, I hate those words too, but it's all going to come out in dreams. And so you might as well just like, fine, I'm going to take off all my clothes. I don't care.
For sure. And the whole thing about allowing yourself to take that time and to sit with that and do the thing that you needed to do to generate that feeling of wanting to cry. For me, it's certain songs.
Yeah.
And I have cried to the point where I sobbed so hard that I had busted blood vessels all around my eyes. I looked like somebody punched me in the face.
Uh,
And I've had that multiple times. It still continues to happen. I'll feel something bubbling up. Again, like you, no clue what the hell I'm crying about.
yeah.
But when I feel that, my son was considerably younger, he would come in and he would be all concerned and upset. Mommy, are you okay? And I had to explain to him, I'm just going through this stuff and I'm processing some emotions and I'm fine.
Yeah. Oh, that's
So,
good. It took me a long time to just process the emotions to, why the heck am I so sad? To trying to figure it out all the time. Now it's just, I still do that a little bit, but it's just like, nah, just let the emotion come and go, because it would just drive me crazy. Why am I crying? I need to know why I'm crying.
yeah, but kudos to you, because I tell everybody not to scare anybody off, but I do like to say that this path is not for the faint of heart. It's
Yes.
it just isn't, because there is a lot of work involved in it and
Yeah.
a lot of vulnerability, because we have to expose ourselves to ourselves. And I think that's the biggest, scariest thing, because there's so much of that that has been suppressed and it is residing in our subconscious. So to allow it to come up and out and see the light of day so that we can heal it, acknowledge it, can be terrifying, to the point I know people who have even said when they started on the path, this is too much work.
Yeah.
And they literally backed off and stopped. And I was like, but oh my God, you had this glimpse of the possibility and you see what it's all about. How could you ever say no and just accept what is and not move forward empowered and knowing and accepting that you can create your own reality? Oh my goodness, I can't imagine. It's like having a car and never using it. You have the
I
freedom
think you,
to get out.
yeah. I think you totally nailed it. And I think it's that vulnerability that makes the journey really difficult. Definitely were times I was like, why the fuck am I doing this? But then a few days later, it's like, okay, come on, bring it on. I can keep going.
Yes.
And yeah, that's a really good point. And I'd be willing to bet that is what scares most people off. It's just too much work, too much vulnerability. It's funny, in group work, they sometimes call it, when you feel like you've shared too much about yourself and you feel afterwards really self-conscious, they call it the vulnerability hangover. That's all this work is one big giant vulnerability hangover.
I love that term. It's funny as hell, but yeah, absolutely. I agree with it, because sometimes it can be just like, wow. And you get that feeling of, oh shit, TMI. I
Yeah,
just put it out there, TMI. Too much
yeah.
information. Sorry, guys.
Okay, well, I got two more stories I want to share that I wrote down at the beginning. And so, one, I want to give you a little context too. So, about 2 years into my journey, full on Kundalini awakening. And just to tell you again, I think, Lori, I'm walking the path of the fool because it just seems I keep bumbling into these things. I don't even know what the word means, at least not consciously. So I'd never heard of Kundalini. And so I owned a very large consumer products company. That was why I was so deeply in debt getting it off the ground. And I had the chance to appear on QVC, the home shopping network. And that was a really good opportunity. And they told me you're going to have 700,000 new viewers every minute because people channel surf. They stop on the home channel, they see if what they're looking at is interesting, and if not, they move on. And so I'd never done anything live on TV before, so I was nervous. And so I was on for 7 minutes. I didn't screw up, and sold a fair amount of product, not a ton, but yeah, didn't embarrass myself. And I went back to my hotel room afterwards in Philadelphia, and I felt all this joy in my body. And I just assumed it was because I didn't screw up on TV, and it was just kind of the relief afterwards. And it was a 3 hour time difference, and I just flown in from Seattle earlier that day. And so anyway, I had trouble going to sleep. And at midnight, I'm laying there dozing, and I had to get up at 5 a.m. to fly home. All of a sudden, I have what feels like this beautiful orgasm in my perineum area. And it kind of is like, poof, and I feel it just go up and permeate my whole body. It's like, what the hell was that? And then a few minutes later, poof, oh my God, what was that? And it goes on and on and on. And half of me is like the little, I was raised Catholic, not exactly, but kind of part-time Catholic growing up. And the Catholic boy in me is like, what the hell is going on? And the other part of me is, I don't know, but this feels better than any drug. And so it goes on for hours. And finally, I get up and I'm shaking. It felt like I had a bunch of caffeine, like energy in my extremities. I'm shaking it off. And I try to go to sleep. I sleep for maybe 2 hours, get up. And as I fly home, I email some people from my spiritual retreat and said, I have this energy. And what is this? And they said, well, sounds like Kundalini rising. Look it up. And I looked it up and went, oh, that did kind of sound like that. And that began the journey of about every 2 or 3 nights, what I call the energy would come. And eventually it started coming with profound visions. I mean, oh my God, it just, and so it was doing me, it was working me. And 95% of the time, it only showed up at nighttime, only when like I said, it kind of knew when to push me and when to pull back. But every now and then when I was out in public, this energy would come barreling through me and then pouring out into some other stranger, like the waitress in the restaurant or something like that. And so I want to share this because I had not been a healer up to that point, but you might say suddenly I became a healer. And if you've done Reiki, it works best when you just get out of the way, right? And the more you try to control it, it doesn't work. And so in some ways, it almost felt like I'm being used to be a healer, but John isn't doing anything. John's just the fool, right? Okay, so here's the story I want to tell. I met this gal at a little weekend spiritual thing, and I was very enamored with her because she was very psychic and intuitive. And that was a really interesting thing to me at the time. Like, wow, I want to know about intuition and psychic ability. And what I liked about her was her readings seemed really clear and clean, and she seemed kind of had a really grounded sort of Midwestern sensibility about her. And at that time, I thought all psychics were airy-fairy, and like, no, she seemed pretty, had a job and everything. And so we started communicating by email, became good friends. And then, so I'm in Seattle and she lived in Chicago, and we made a date, and I had to fly into Chicago on business. So we decided to hang out for the weekend. And again, I'm very intrigued by all things intuitive. And this woman was so intuitive, I felt like I'd been married for 50 years to her. She was finishing all my sentences, And so anyway, she told me, she goes, I started out on the side being a massage therapist. And over time, I started getting messages from people's bodies. And pretty soon people started coming to me for the messages and not the massage. I'm like, well, that's really cool. So I was interested in like messages from the body. How do you do that? And she goes, well, go hold my feet. The feet are a great place to get messages. So I'm holding the feet of this woman I barely know to my chest, trying to get psychic messages from her feet. And all the voices in my head are going, you're not going to get any messages. She's been doing this for 20 years. And you're just, you're trying too hard, or you need to not try so hard. You need to just relax. And anyway, chatter, chatter, chatter. And okay, hang on to your hat. This story gets kind of weird. After what felt like the longest 3 minutes of my life, I suddenly have this hyper vivid image of a little girl who looks like she's 3 or 4 years old in white underpants. She's running in the darkness, looking back over her shoulder, just terrified, like in fear. That's all I see. And when she said messages from the body, I thought the body was going to talk to me. I wasn't really expecting an image, but something intuitively knew what to do. So I went and asked her, I said, would you let me do what's coming to me intuitively? And then she looks at me like, yeah, but I might cry. And so something big is about to happen. I sit down next to her. I put my right hand on my heart chakra and my left hand on hers. And the second my hand touches her, what feels like two lightning bolts come out of the sky, like with the impact, like power, shoot through my right shoulder, across my chest, down my arm, into her. And suddenly I'm just a witness to what looks like this Christ-like aspect that has found the little girl I saw in my image and is placing a coat of white light around her, telling her she never has to be afraid ever again. And she's clutching this coat like just like joyfully, and all that darkness around her is completely illuminated. It's completely bright. End of image, end of experience. And this woman, this was our first date, is laying there bawling. And I'm like, what the fuck just happened there? And I also meant like, I'm not trained for this. I don't even know how to react. And so we went to dinner, and she told me when she was 4 years old, her father had walked out on her family, disappeared, never came back, never to be seen again. Like, don't know if he died, don't know if he ran off with another woman. And in that moment, remember we were talking about trauma and how it can kind of hang on? You might say an abandoned, terrified little 4-year-old girl never grew up and still existed in this woman even though she was 40 years old, very grounded, had a job and everything. And so then I come along, and so I've learned since, and I can't tell you whether it's true or not, Lori, that sometimes what happens when these grand experiences, it's like her guides and my guides got together to pull this off. John, the personality ego, just had to get out of the way. And so I think it was like, no, you're done carrying this abandoned little 4-year-old terrified girl. That phase in your life is done. And weirdly, she'd never been married in her life. And a year later, she met a guy and said she was so happy with her husband, and I've never seen her ever again. I don't know what happened to her. So, but it was that even in that experience, afterwards, even though it felt like this great experience of grace, I also had what felt like a vulnerability hangover. Like I didn't know what to do or what to say. I didn't even do anything. I mean, I kind of did. It was like I just offered and opened. And so I didn't know how to react in that moment. I hadn't been trained. So like I said, another story of the fool just bumbling into something. So,
wow. But amazing that you were connected enough, open enough to allow for an experience like that to happen through you. You gave that woman an enormous gift, because I think that, they say that the majority of our trauma happens between birth and 7 years old. And
yeah,
that is the thing. We have to heal those aspects of us, that inner child. And you found that core wounding for her.
yeah.
By holding her feet to your chest, you found her that core wounding. And they say that people come into our lives for a reason, a season, or a lifetime, and you were her reason. That was it. You gave her an enormous gift. And it's so wonderful to hear that you would trust your intuition.
Yeah.
that you would follow that and do what you were guided to do to help her in that way, because that is profound, John. It's profound.
Yeah. And
Wow.
again, everything you just said, I learned later. I just didn't know then. And so even all this time, because we felt this great attraction to each other, but it went deeper than that. And it was like, you guys are coming together to affect this healing, and then you're going to go your separate ways. And that's not something they teach you in school,
No.
And so I have tried ever since then, if I feel particularly drawn to somebody, but I can't figure out why, to just go with it anyway and see where it leads me. It doesn't, not everything leads to love and a long-term relationship. Sometimes it's just brief. You came to do something together, then you go your separate ways.
Yes. And funny that she would have known the methodology for you to facilitate that
I
by
know.
holding her feet. You did the rest of it by allowing it to come through you. And it's funny because I am a Reiki master, so I am very familiar with the sending of the energy and all of that. But I was sitting one day, sitting on my bed, and I just had my hands up in front of me like this, and I was sending energy to a woman. She's like my best friend. We've been friends and mastermind partners for 10 years now, but we've never met, which is ridiculous. But so I was sending energy to her, and all of a sudden, I saw an outline of a body in front of me, and there were these things just lighting up. And it was weird because they looked like onions. It's almost like there was an onion, and then you even had the green part coming out like through the skin.
Yeah.
And so I was guided to take my hands in front of me and to grab each one of those and yank them out. And and she could feel it. She could actually feel it. And she told me that while I was working with a couple of archangels, and one of them, he said he was cauterizing the area. He was closing up. He cauterized it after I removed that thing. So I call that now my onion removal process.
The ORP, that's your new book.
There you go. And I mean, it's these bizarre things that happen to us because we're open enough to go along, and I mean, I kind of felt like an idiot. I'm not going to lie. I was by myself, but I still felt like, what in the hell am I doing? But I just went with it. I'm here in Michigan. She's over in Wisconsin, and she felt the heat. She felt the areas that I was yanking these things out, and they were all blockages.
I love it.
So
yeah, life is so crazy, magical, mysterious, fun, isn't it?
yeah, it
confusing.
Yeah, absolutely, that as well. Yeah. But these stories, John, the way that you tell them and the honesty with how you're expressing them, I love this. It's very engaging, very engaging. And I'm really grateful that you're willing to just go with this with me, because this format is brand new for me. And oh my God, this is so much better.
Well, if you have time, I have one more story.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
It sounds like a silly thing, but there's a very practical aspect to the story that I want to tell. So for my company, I used to have to fly quite a bit, so maybe 25 times a year. And so I was getting ready to fly from Seattle to Jacksonville, Florida, and I had a connection in Dallas. And the day before my trip, I threw my back out. And I'm grumbling around the house because I'm like, oh my God, nothing's going to be worse than sitting in an uncomfortable airplane, multiple flights all the way to Florida. I had to get up early the next morning, give a 30-minute presentation, and fly all the way back to Seattle. And I thought, oh my God, my back's going to be a wreck by the time I get back. And because in the past, if I'd thrown my lower back out, there's nothing worse than sitting in an uncomfortable position or seat. And, I just could picture myself with no leg room on the plane, and it was just going to be terrible. So I go to bed hoping for a miracle, no dice. I wake up the next morning, my back hurts like crazy. On a scale of 1 to 10, if 10's the worst pain, it was probably at a 6. But it was already so stiff that when I got to the airport, I was literally like pulling myself up, from my car and trying to lift my legs out. I'm standing in line of security. I'm just a few spaces away from handing my, boarding pass and driver's license to the TSA agent, grumbling, steeling myself for what a difficult trip this is going to be. when all of a sudden I become aware that some part of me is humming the chorus of the song, Don't Worry, Be Happy, and aiming the vibrations of the song at my lower back. And I'm like stuck between two worlds all of a sudden. Again, hundreds of people all around me having this weird inner experience. And I did know at that point in my life that sound and vibration could be healing. And I thought, it's probably not helping me bitching about how much my back hurts and how much worse it's going to be. So I started humming the chorus to the song. And the nice thing about airports and airplanes, there's so much ambient noise, nobody notices that you're humming all the time. So I hummed it like a mantra, I just kept humming that part over and over to me. And so I get on the plane, I have a window seat, and the guy sits next to me is like the size of a sumo wrestler, impossibly large. Again, the voice is like, oh my God, now you can't even sit up straight. You got this huge guy next to you. So no, I just started humming the song. Well, in the flight from Seattle to Dallas, which is about 3.5 hours, my pain dropped from a 6 to a 4, which I had never had that experience. Like with backs, I had to like walk and stretch and get on the floor in what they call static back position. And so all I did was hum. So I hummed all the way to Jacksonville, Florida. I hummed that night, with my sales team. So I had 2 flights on the way there, 2 flights on the way home. The second flight, an impossibly large woman gets next to me. I'm like, are you kidding me? And so again, I'm like, don't worry, I'm just going to hum. Next day, I get up and I'm humming in my hotel, humming in the rental car. And the first person that gets next to me in the plane is impossibly large again. And so no, I'm going to keep humming. Last flight from Dallas to Seattle, the second day, I have an empty seat next to me, and I'm thinking, I think I passed some tests from the universe. This is great. I got an empty seat. My back's actually feeling better from humming to it. Who the hell knew that could happen? And then I see a woman coming down the aisle with a big baby in her arms, and guess where she sits? He's 2 years old, but he looks 4 years old. He's kicking me the whole time. Don't worry, I just hum. By the time I land, my pain's gone from a 6 to a 1. It's almost like I never threw my back out. And I love it's so simple, but I have to remind myself 2 things about that story. One is my mind is built to play out habits over and over again. And so I told the story in my book. If I got bit by a large black dog when I'm young, I might be afraid of large black dogs or assume that all large black dogs bite for the rest of my life. And so just because every time I threw my back out in the past, it had to be healed by walking and stretching, and it took weeks to recover, doesn't mean that's how it is today. And I just learned, I have learned a lot of my journey has been greater and greater body awareness. And the body can heal itself in remarkable ways if we support it. But it's not supportive to grumble and say how bad it is and how bad it's going to be and how long it's going to take to heal. And so even, my wife and I went on a long car trip and I was grumbling because my butt was sore, my back was sore, my legs were tight because it was a long drive. And I suddenly remembered and I started humming the song. And in mere minutes, suddenly I'm like, wow, I feel so much better all of a sudden. And so that's an example of one of the many stories and experiences I share in my story that had a practical aspect that I just have to remember to do. Like, don't grumble. Don't think the future is going to be just like it was in the past. It actually could be quite different.
Wow. And you're so right about that too, because it can always change. It can always change when we change our perceptions and our beliefs. The premise of this podcast really is to help people wake up, to remember the fact that we are all connected. We're connected to not only ourselves, we're connected to each other, we're connected to the planet, all the planet's inhabitants, in trying to shift the way that we're showing up in the world. And these stories give such a profound and beautiful experience of being connected to your higher self, your
Yes.
intuition, source, God, whatever you want to call it, being connected to that energy that we all come from, the energy of love, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And so, with that in mind, and I do ask this of everybody, but Based on all of these wonderful experiences and your current areas of expertise, what one thing would you recommend to someone to help them wake the fuck up?
Well, the first thing I would do is the one thing I would do is just state it clearly. I want to wake the fuck up. I'm ready to wake up. Start the awakening process in me. And I think it's going to be different for everybody. You know, I didn't share, Lori, I got a lot out of creativity. I'm like one of the many people that thought Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way, was unbelievable eye opener for me. And so for me, it was primarily opening up to dreams and dream work. But you know, Julia Cameron has a really good way of kind of cracking open that sort of rigid, rational, habit-driven side of us into something else. So I think I would start by saying, this is what I want, and then just see where you're led to go after that.
Do you know you are the first person to actually recommend that?
Really?
To state it to the universe, this is what I want. Let's
Yeah.
make this happen. You're the
Yeah.
first person to suggest that. That is that's the foundational piece, right? You have to have the desire to want to do it first, I think. And yeah, it's just amazing.
Yeah.
Really amazing.
Yeah, thank you. I think just state it, see where it goes. You know, my wife is very sensitive and intuitive, but she's not visual like me. She wishes she was, but it doesn't mean that she's not dialed in. She's been a life coach for 13 years, and she has the ability to kind of just drop in and be really present with another person. And she trusts her intuition, the sensitivity. She trusts that she'll be guided to say the right things, ask the right questions. And so not everybody's path to awakening is the same. You know, mine's been highly visual, but a lot of really dialed in people just don't have visions. So, and you know, it's beautiful to have visions, but the challenging thing with visions is that your mind has to still interpret the vision sometimes.
Yes.
Sometimes it's better to just drop into just pure knowing. You know, you just know. You don't know how you know, you just know. And then there's no interpretation factor involved. So like I said, mine came primarily through dreams, through creativity, probably what I would call loosely opening to my feminine side, right brain side. But yeah, I think just say, this is what I want, and then lead me, guide me.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. What an amazing conversation, John. And I love the way that you did this. I love the fact that you were so open to just going with the flow and having a conversation like this with me. And I'm really loving this format, by the way, because it is so much nicer to just have a conversation. And I think that the way that you laid out your book and did it in individual stories like that is fantastic, just fantastic, because anybody that picks up the book can just take it in bite-sized chunks and sit with each story and feel into it and see, what am I getting out of this? You know, how does this resonate for me? Does it resonate for me? And if it does, what's the message in it for me?
Oh, you nailed it. That's why I wrote it that way. Those are the stories I like. I actually like hearing true stories of other people's lives. Like, okay, I had this profound experience, but I actually want to know about you, Lori. Tell me a little bit about your life. How'd you grow up? How did you end up being this person that has these experiences? And I don't want to say I have a short attention span, but I think the whole world has a shorter attention span nowadays. And I like that fact that I could just randomly open the book and just read. Most of the stories are 1 to 3 pages long. I mean, there's a few that are 5 or 10, but that's the kind of book I like to read before I went to bed at night. Just randomly open, kind of a magical story, kind of short, read 2 or 3, go to sleep, done.
Yeah, most definitely. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
I will have this information up in the show notes, but for anybody who is interested in connecting with you, checking out the book, how would they go about getting in touch?
Yeah, the book is called The Synchronicity of Love, Stories That Heal, Transform, and Awaken. And, you know, you heard some of the stories today. The title I came up with because the more I started to explore unconditional love and be unconditional love, the more and more sort of magical synchronicities, miracles, coincidences started to happen, things I didn't think were possible. And so that's how I came up with the title. You can find it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, probably anywhere that books are sold. And my website is John David Latta, and last name spelled Latta, johndavidlatta.com.
Oh, I said it wrong when I introduced you. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. And I want to ask you, is there anything that you'd like to add before we wrap it up?
Yeah, there's a quote I like, although I'm stealing it from Michael Crichton, and Michael Crichton stole it from Rilke. And it goes, some evening, take a step out of your house, which you know so well. Enormous space is near. And for all you rigid, rational people like me who are know-it-alls, step out of that house that you know so well. There's a whole bunch of miracles, magic, amazing things that are so close by. You just have to kind of step out of that house and open your mind, open your heart.
Absolutely fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, John, for joining me today. What a pleasure.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I loved hanging out and chatting with you, Lori.
Thanks. Me too, really. And I want to say thanks to everybody who tuned in today. As always, I am grateful for your presence. I will see you all back here next Sunday with another episode as we continue to wake the fuck